is pursuant to the memorandum we received from His Excellency the President, making certain recommendations. First and foremost, it's important we clear the air because there is anxiety, there are fears that the President may actually be initiating some constitutional reforms or amendments similar to the BBI which was rejected. It is important to point out that there is distinction between the BBI and the memorandum we have received, in that the BBI clearly was an initiative of the President and the Executive. The Gazette notices that were initiated the process were signed by His Excellency the President then, while he went ahead to constitute the committee that came up with a proposed constitutional amendment. As far as this is concerned, what the President has done is to make recommendations in his capacity, his two capacities. The first one being the President of the Republic of Kenya, and he is entitled to do so on behalf of the people of Kenya who elected him. Number two, also as a citizen. And he has a right to do so as a citizen to make proposals to this House to consider parliamentary initiative or a popular initiative, whatever it is that has to be considered. The memorandum talks about 4 issues. The first one being the 2/3 gender rule, very important because of the constitutional article which exists, that if this House does not enact laws relating to the 2/3 gender rule, then it stands dissolved. Now, it is important to remind the House that the former Chief Justice Maraga actually made the advisory that the House, the 12th Parliament, had to be dissolved because it had failed to comply with that constitutional provision. Fortunately, it wasn't, but that is the farthest it went. It remains law in this country, and if we do not follow what the Constitution says, there is that risk. The second one relates to the CDF, the GAF, and the Senate Fund. We've already debated extensively regarding this, the importance of those funds and why they should actually be entrenched in the Constitution. The third one relates to the office of the official opposition leader. And this is where there are jitters as to whether we are creating an office for somebody. There are arguments that this House cannot amend the Constitution to comply with that proposal. One reason being given is that our country follows what is known as the presidential system of government, while in areas where, or in countries where we have the official opposition leader, the system of government is parliamentary, as found in Australia, found in England, or UK, Canada, and such other Commonwealth countries. I do not personally agree, and I'll be persuading my committee, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, to see it from a different perspective. That even if we do have a presidential system, there are bits and pieces that marry our system with the parliamentary system. It's those bits and pieces that we are going to exploit, that we are going to use, so that we are able to bring in this office. The importance of the office cannot be overemphasized. The reason being that the person who comes number 2 after a general election is a very important person. And this is for posterity. It doesn't have to have the last elections in mind. That person has a lot to contribute when it comes to checks and balances of the government. It's also important to know where to find this person. For example, now, 2 of these issues have been referred to my committee, Justice and Legal Affairs. We would want to hear from the leader of opposition exactly what his views are. But as we speak today, we do not know where to find him. We do not have to go to rallies to find him. If we go to Capitol Hill, where he used to be the last time, possibly to be said we are going for Mwosho Moja. So, where do we find him? Where do we take his views from? Do we meet him in one of the committee rooms in Parliament? That is dishonorable. From now henceforth, we should consider according that office the respect it deserves, so that the occupier, who is going to be anyone ranging from the members of parliament who are here and others who will be elected in the future, can actually sit in that office, can be consulted on all matters that may come into deliberation in this house and in this country. Two of the matters are committed to Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and I confirm we will move with the expedition to actually determine them so that this committee has a house. I know for sure we have to do public participation. We have to go around the country as members of parliament and members of that committee, obtaining views from Kenyans. And here, what we are dealing with are proposals. Kenyans can actually reject these proposals in total. If that happens, it's for the good of the country, it is the will of the people. If Kenyans agree that parliament should consider, then we will move to the next level to determine whether these are parliamentary initiative amendments or they are popular initiatives, which means we have to go to referendum, and we will require a referendum law to actually guide us. We do not have one at the present moment, but we should be looking into having an act of parliament on referendum, because we have said it before in the 12th parliament, we do not know how to operate or how to actualize a referendum without law. The Supreme Court has also pointed out to us regarding this. And finally, we have the other recommendation made by the President, which is that cabinet secretaries do come to the House to answer questions. And there are, again, jitters, anxiety that we are bringing strangers into the House. We are also contravening the law that this is not a parliamentary system where cabinet ministers are members of parliament and can sit in the House and, and deal with matters relating to the executive. Our position, as I said again, it's barring the two, because when we brought the 2010 Constitution, we allowed two strangers expressly to come into the House, address the House, and whatever they propose is acted on by the House. The first stranger who comes in is His Excellency the President. He actually has that mandate from the Constitution. He comes over here to make the State of the Nation address, and we debate that address thereafter. And we actualize some of the views he gives to us in the form of laws, regulations, and motions. The second person who comes over here is the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Finance. Again, this is given by the Constitution. He comes over here, he gives us the budgetary estimates after Parliament has looked at them, as we are doing now, right from the supplementary budget to the budget policy statement, which has just been tabled, and eventually the parliamentary estimates. This is provided by the Constitution. Nothing stops us as the House with our handmaidens and the standing orders, as I heard Honorable Nyikal saying. Standing orders are handmaidens of this House. They are not cast in stone. That is why at all times we have what is called the saving provision of the standing orders, which gives the Speaker the power to rule on anything that is not provided. And that's a standing order number one. But in this particular case, we have standing orders which we can amend. And after the amendment, for sure what is going to happen is we are able to allow cabinet secretaries to come here and answer questions. We are also able to interrogate them. We are also able to ensure that they do not get away with the escapist answers, which is what we get from chairmen of committees when they came to read statements, to read answers to questions which they know nothing about. So this is a very important motion, and I would urge the House, we debate it soberly. There are proposals, they are not cast in stone. The decision lies with the House and with the Kenyans. With those remarks, I do support the motion.
Thank you, Sir George. The Honorable John Bwari, Emeritus, nominated member by ODM.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. This is just a general motion, Madam Speaker, I know we will be dealing with the specifics. Whereas I don't have a problem with the substance of the memorandum by the President to Parliament, the 4 key issues are issues that have been debated, talked about largely and widely in this country. The issue of official opposition and where that position should sit has been debated largely. The issue of the funding, I cannot overemphasize. And I know there is a process that is in place that will ensure that we anchor and constitutionalize in a way that now those who have been doubting the constitutionality, because I don't agree with the position of the MP for Kangema that CDF is unconstitutional. It is not. But there are people who are trying to portray it as unconstitutional. We want to seal those loopholes. I have no problem with that. I don't have a problem with answering questions before people's representatives. I also don't have a problem at all with the gender principle, because we embedded it in the Constitution. We need to actualize it. But I have a problem with the 2 things. Madam Speaker, number 1 is the process and the procedure. And number 2 is the principles and honesty in politics in this country. So beginning with the number 1 issue on the process and the procedure, whereas my colleagues across the aisle are really struggling to separate and distinguish how different it is between the memorandum from President William Ruto and the process that was started by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, I don't see any difference. In fact, if you ask me, the initiative by President Uhuru Kenyatta had more people participation than this that is now being generated by William Ruto. Why do I say so? At least for President Uhuru Kenyatta, he started a process with the people. He created a task force which went to the people. This one is a president who is writing direct to Parliament, no consultation. We don't even know who he spoke to. Whether he spoke to people who visited him at State House, I don't know. This one is a direct initiative by the president. I just want to caution members of Parliament and the people of Kenya that it is not right, and I want to repeat it, it is not right to encourage the president to initiate constitutional amendments. This country has enjoyed democracy fairly compared to our counterparts across the region. This country is standing out. This country, probably with Ghana, are standing out as countries that are promising in terms of democracy. We should not allow any indication of an individual rolling back those gains. And there is a possibility that one can test waters. Don't allow the president to start testing waters by writing to Parliament for constitutional amendment tomorrow, and with the gerrymandering that I have already started seeing, and the games being played around with the members of the opposition now being invited at will, and Jubilee almost gone to the other side, with MDG gone, with UDM gone, and many, many individual MPs, including now my party, is under threat of being raided. I foresee a possibility of a president who, once emboldened, can recommend far-reaching amendments to the Constitution, which may even take us to a life presidency. That is my fear. Number 2, Madam Speaker, look at the issues that have been raised in the memorandum, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, when we raised most of these issues, look at BBI. BBI recommended that a person who comes second in presidential election should be made a member of Parliament, to be in this House, to be able to participate and lead the troops from the floor of the House. Look at the issue of the cabinet. We recommended that cabinet should come from Parliament. And we said that even those who would come from outside would be made ex-officio members of Parliament, as Attorney General used to be. Madam Speaker, on the issue of the 2/3 gender principle, that has been captured very well and exhaustively in detail in the BBI. Madam Speaker, I can say in a nutshell that when we proposed this to the people of Kenya, we were called names. I remember Kenya Kwanza and the leadership of the Kenya Kwanza called us selfish, people who are interested in grabbing power, people who want to extend power and existence in office of certain unnamed individuals, but the target was Uhuru Kenyatta. people who are looking for space for people who should be retiring. That was the word then. And we were told that we were not focusing on the needs of the people of Kenya, and that the people of Kenya are suffering. That constitutional amendment is not a priority. Madam Speaker, I don't know whether now the people of Kenya are enjoying and that the living standard is now, the cost of living is low. Yet, when I walk across, we are suffering even more than last year. The cost of food is unaffordable. There is the drought situation in the country. How I wish that the language of President William Ruto, when he was campaigning, he sticks to that script and make the people of Kenya have a bearable life. Instead of writing memorandums to us, these are issues we can deal with. We can sit down as a country and agree that we want to go the route of constitutional amendment to introduce the official leader of opposition, to introduce cabinet secretary to come to parliament and become members of parliament instead of passing through the back door and escape routes to look for a way of bringing strangers in the house. And I heard Honorable Murugara saying that we allowed some 2 strangers. The president is not a stranger. Look at the presidential systems across the world. The president is part of a legislative process of the country. That is why he is the last one to assent to the bills. He cannot be a stranger. The other issue that you have brought of the CS for Treasury, that is not a constitutional provision. In the Constitution, it is only allowed to make pronouncement. He can even make it from Uhuru Park, from KICC. It is us who decided to bring in the standing order provision to allow him to stand there, which is, in my view, unconstitutional. But we are living with it. And by the way, those pronouncements don't make any, there is no value to those pronouncements. We are only living with our neighbors in the East African community. Madam Speaker, I want to wind up by saying this very strongly, that there is dishonesty in this country. How I wish that, and Dr. William Ruto is my friend, how I wish that he went back to his campaign pledges. Our people are suffering. Constitutional amendment, I want to take now his position when he was campaigning. Constitutional amendment is not a priority for this country. The priority is the cost of living. Don't overtax our people. Stop snooping in our phones. If I send money to my mother, that is not income to my mother. It is a transfer of resources. He should consult people like us who have extensive and wide knowledge in financial management. The issue of taxation should be left to KRA. The president can never be a tax collection agent. We have competent people in KRA. If Kenyatta family is not paying tax, they must pay. But let KRA follow them. Anyone who is not paying tax should pay, but let KRA follow them. Let us not weaponize KRA. You are the ones who told us that President Uhuru Kenyatta was weaponizing state institutions. You are doing exactly that. You are weaponizing KRA. You have already made judiciary impotent. We are moving in a very dangerous direction. That is why I'm reluctant to accept this idea of all of us trying to run to the president. We want to support your government. The president has enough members of parliament to support his government. We must be here to provide checks and balances to this executive. And Madam Speaker, you want more. I can hear the majority leader saying they want more because they have bad intention. You want to make bad laws in this country without absolute numbers. I am still very comfortable where I am. And to Honorable Kimani Chungwa, he said I may be official opposition leader. I want to be president of this country, not official opposition leader. I will be president of this country, not official opposition leader. I don't want to official opposition leader. I've been minority leader. It is enough for me. I want to now move up and become the president of the Republic of Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With those many remarks, I oppose the motion.
The Honorable Member for Kisii County, Honorable Donya Doris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we go through this debate, I will agree with some members in terms of gender. Women are transformational role models due to the challenges that they face. They will always want to leave good marks. They will always want to perform, and women will be number one to talk about issues to do with gender, GBV, when there are job opportunities. We will always stand firm to make sure that women are allocated their portion. As we go through the constitutional amendment discussion, we must consider those that improve the lives of our people. Our changes should be on issues that promote the lives of Kenyans, issues to deal with poverty, not issues to deal with individuals. So change of constitution, Madam Speaker, should be changes that make mwananchi happy, not those that are for leaders. As I stand from this end, like I come from Kisii County, we have issues to do with FGM, issues that our male counterparts will rarely speak about. So when we consider the gender balance issue, I'm sure most of the women seated in this house will understand things to do with GBV, will understand things to do with girl child, even the issues of sanitary pads. This aligns well with women more than it aligns well with our male counterparts. So this I see is very paramount in terms of the constitutional changes on gender and even the allocations of affirmative action fund. This, when we consider this in the constitution and it is not challenged, women will sit and put focus to make sure that there is enough for women. As it is now, we are competing with the male members of parliament in terms of bursaries and even other small activities that happen on the ground. So I support the motion, but differ a little bit on bringing the ministers to the floor of the House for questioning, since that should be taken care of by the committee members. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Kibwezi West, Honorable Ikomas Mutuse.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand, first of all, to contribute to the motion, to the memorandum by His Excellency the President that came to the House proposing several constitutional amendments. Regarding the matter of CDF, Madam Speaker and the House are aware that we debated that extensively. We also formed a joint committee with the Senate, and the presidential memorandum can only be seen to add credibility to the proposal by the Honorable Gishimu and the Honorable Member for Matungulu that was debated in a similar manner before this House. I would urge honorable members to let that matter be dealt with by the joint committee of this Assembly and the Senate so that we make progress, so that there is harmony in the presidential proposal and the proposal that this House had initiated before the presidential memorandum. On the issue of the gender role, all of us agree that we have an history where women were not participating in our governance institutions as much as they should. We also know that the contribution of women in the development of our economy and in building our families cannot be gainsaid. And therefore, and we also know that we have been at a constitutional crisis, so to speak, because none other than the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, retired Chief Justice Maraga, advised this country that this House, the 12th Parliament, and even this 13th Parliament, are unconstitutional regarding to the 2/3 gender principle. And therefore, there is urgency in considering the proposals by the President so that we see how we can make this House and the Senate and the county assemblies, I know the county assemblies are compliant, constitutional. Madam Speaker, the President, alongside CDF and GAF, is also proposing the Senate Oversight Fund. Wisdom is that the Constitution has not just created the House of Senate. The Constitution has created the National Assembly and the Senate as Parliament. And therefore, our proposal will be to rename the Senate Oversight Fund as Parliamentary Oversight Fund, so that even members of the National Assembly can be facilitated in their oversight duties in their constituencies, and those who oversight counties, like the women representatives, can also be facilitated to do their work. Madam Speaker, the elephant in the House is the creation of the office of the Leader of Official Opposition. There are two technical challenges that have been that have come forth by those who are opposed to the proposal by the President. Number one, they have argued that in 2010, as a country, we chose a presidential system of government. And within a presidential system of government, it is alien to have the Leader of Official Opposition, the position of the Leader of Official Opposition. As a student of law, I know that the law is a phenomenon of the society. We know, in students of sociological jurisprudence know that law follows society. And we also know that the troops in the opposition, the 6 million, 8 million people who voted for the opposition, have their leadership. And the reality is that that leadership does not have a forum to air their views. And it is important in living with the reality of our society to create a forum for the opposition to be able to air their views. Number two, the lack of a forum by the opposition to air their views continues to weaken the opposition election to another. And therefore, there is, in terms of building our democracy, in terms of strengthening our democracy, there is a lot of wisdom in creating the office of the Leader of Opposition as an institution, not as an office for an individual, as an institution that speaks to the people who vote for the opposition, Kenyans who vote for the opposition, leaders elected at different levels, may they be MCS, may they be members of parliament, so that they have a constitutional and institutional mechanism to canvass their issues, so that when they come before this House, those issues are canvassed by the membership of the opposition. Madam Speaker, I therefore propose that as we debate, we also look at the reality of our society, so that we do not imprison ourselves in constitutional technicalities and ignore the reality of our society. The person who sits in this House as a leader of minority may not be the person who controls the rank and file of the opposition. The rank and file of the opposition is controlled, as is following, as is leadership outside this House. And partly why that leadership will find expression in political rallies is because they do not have an official forum where they can air their views. And therefore I want to persuade members that we craft our constitution to live to the realities of our society as opposed to imprisoning ourselves to technicalities. Madam Speaker, the other technicality that has been raised, and I'm happy the Honorable John Bandi spoke before us, is that the President, pursuant to the judgment of the Supreme Court on the BBI, all the way from the High Court through the Court of Appeal, the President cannot initiate a constitutional amendment. I think we need to distinguish two issues here. Number one is that there are two routes to amending a constitution. There is a parliamentary route and there is a popular initiative route. My careful reading of the BBI judgment is that the President is barred from initiating a popular initiative because that route, as rightly found by the Supreme Court, is the preserve of Wanjiku. Number two, even further, is that my reading of the presidential memorandum is that it is not in itself an initiative to amend the Constitution. It is a proposal to this House. Members would realize that the three arms of government, this is the only arm of government, Parliament, and therefore the National Assembly, that is given the constitutional power to legislate, to make laws. And therefore, for the arms of government to speak to each other, the president is asking the arm that is mandated by the Constitution to debate. He is not telling us, please, this is a proposal. This is not a bill. It has not come to this House as a bill to amend the Constitution. It has come as a view by a citizen of the Republic who is also the president. And that citizen has a right to propose. This House has a right to debate, and I suppose that's why we are doing a general debate, to agree or disagree. At the time when we agree is when now we shall have mechanisms to progress this further, and then we can now decide whether it is a popular initiative, whether some of them require a popular initiative, whether others require a parliamentary initiative. But at a personal level, having carefully looked at them, I'm persuaded that most of the matters that have been proposed by the president can be canvassed through a parliamentary initiative. Madam Speaker, I therefore urge this House, as we debate, to look at the reality of our country, to look at national interest, to look at legislating not only for posterity but also for uniting this country. A lot of us are talking about the cost of living, a lot of us are talking about the economy. But we also know that the economy cannot grow in isolation. The economy requires stability. The economy requires every Kenyan to feel to be part of this society so that they can contribute optimally. And to do that, there is every essence for those Kenyans, not just the leadership of the opposition, and this is where we lose it when we say we are creating a position for an individual. We are creating a position for the millions of Kenyans who voted for the opposition to exercise their sovereign right of being in the opposition to canvass their issues. Madam Speaker, I beg to support and I beg to urge members of this House to find it necessary not to imprison themselves in technicalities, but to craft a constitution based on the realities that affect our country as Kenya. Thank you, and I beg to support.
Honorable members, I will ask that even if you have 10 minutes and you can do it in 5 minutes, then you don't have to repeat yourself so as to be sensitive and give other members an opportunity to be able to contribute to this very important procedural motion. I now call upon Honorable Lea Sankaire, member for Kajiado County.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to contribute to this memorandum by His Excellency the President to this House of Parliament through the Speaker. Madam Speaker, I support this memorandum in Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when you look at the issues that has been raised in this memorandum, when you look at the gender implementation of the 2/3 gender rule, it is true that this is a debate that has been evaded for so many years that needs to be, we can no longer bury our heads in the sand like the proverbial ostrich, but we really need to come out and address this issue, because remember, as it has been indicated here, that in the last parliament, the parliament was not constitutionally constituted due to the lack of the required number of women in this house. It is also the same thing today, and it's an issue that we need to address. We have seen by the formation of the affirmative action seat, we have seen the voice of women rising tremendously in parliament. We've also seen the women issues being addressed effectively by the women members of National Assembly. And so, Madam Speaker, my contribution will be that I know that the affirmative action seat for women is also coming to a sunset close, but before we get there, we can continue having this seat as it has encouraged so many women to transit to single-member constituencies. This seat has also seen women rising from the position of the women representative to even governors, and we have seen tremendous shift as women continue to take positions of power because they were given a place in parliament and they were given an affirmative action seat, which has actually encouraged them and made them be more comfortable in vying for these positions that were occupied by men for a very long time. Madam Speaker, we have seen women doing tremendously well through this position, and so as we continue to encourage more women to vie for these positions and to go for the single constituency seat so that we can increase the number in Parliament, this also position of the women representative of the affirmative seat can also continue as we continue to get more women in Parliament. Madam Speaker, we can see that the girl child has really risen, and we can see in the recent past, the boy child has been left. It is because of the affirmative action that we've put to girls for a very long time, and with time they have grown and known their space. They have taken their space in leadership, they have taken their space in education, and so as we continue also to seek for interventions to increase the number of women in this house, we can continue with the affirmative action positions that we currently have, because these are the positions that are encouraging women. And with time, when we achieve the numbers that we need in Parliament, these positions can always be scrapped, and we can continue now fighting for the same positions as men, as I know we will get there with time. I know that Rome was not built in a day, and so I know we are not yet there, but we will get there. I know it was in the recent past, very few women could even stand in Parliament and speak, but you see the numbers are increasing by the day. We are getting there slowly, and I know that with the help of this seat that we currently have, the numbers will increase. Madam Speaker, when I look at the second one, on the constituency development, Senate oversight, and national government affirmative action funds, we know what happened recently, and I don't think the members of Parliament will want to go through that again, or even the members that will come after us will want to go through that. I think we are all in agreement that these funds should be anchored in the Constitution, so that it's a constitutional obligation, as opposed to us wasting a lot of time, every time having to lobby for the funds, having to waste time like how we wasted the last time. We know what the country is going through, that we have a drought in all the parts of the country, and bursaries were a dire need for the people, but you saw how long they took before us addressing that issue to our constituents, because the funds are not anchored in the Constitution. I think we are all in agreement that it's about time that we seek those funds to be anchored in the Constitution, so every other Parliament that will come into place will not have to go through what we went through the other day. Madam Speaker, on the position of the leader of the leader of the official opposition, I think it is something that we can also work on. We have seen in the previous governments that we have the leader of the opposition leader having handshakes, and so bringing a whole lot of confusion in the running of Parliament. I think it's good that once and for all, their position is defined, and I'm saying this knowing that any person can be an opposition leader at any given time. And so it's good that their position is defined, they are given their responsibility, their power, because it also comes with power, so that we don't see any more handshakes, because you can see how handshakes can bring a lot of confusion to an extent that people don't even know which side they belong. They don't know whether they're in Parliament or in opposition, and it becomes hard to oversight Parliament, not knowing which side you stand in, because one time you are in opposition, the second time we have a handshake, and the next time you don't know where you stand. You don't know whether you support the government, you support government, or you're against government. And so it's good that we create this balance, and we create this position, give it the power it deserves, give it the resources it deserves, so that they can actually oversight government, because I believe the job of opposition is to oversight Parliament. When you have an active opposition oversighting Parliament, everything will go well. And so, Madam Speaker, that will be my contribution. Parliamentary oversight on the executive. I also think it's good that we be having our ministers coming to Parliament so we can ask them questions. Madam Speaker, I believe in the recent past, the reason why we also had a lot of confusion on the disbursement of our allocations is because we were receiving information from a third party. The majority leader was being sent, he delivers information, but because we did not have one-on-one with the minister in charge, it was hard for us to know our position and to get to know where we are at. I think when people come to Parliament and answer questions, it gives them accountability. We can hold them accountable because they will be in record that they spoke this and they promised this, and it will be easy for us to follow up on that. With that, Madam Speaker, thank you so much, and thank you, and that's my contribution.
I now call upon the Honourable Member for Tindiret constituency, Honourable Meli.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this memoranda from the President. and it is a very progressive memorandum, Madam Speaker. And I want to say a lot about it, more specifically that Kenya, being a very progressive democracy in Africa, actually gave itself the 2010 Constitution, which, among many other things, is actually to ensure that the country is managed and run well. And that the citizen participation in the management of the affairs of this country is paramount. Honorable Speaker, through this Constitution, we are able to have separation of powers. We have independent institutions, independent commissions, which all of them are actually supposed to do or to work for the good of the citizens of this republic, who are actually the owners of the powers and the owners of the institutions that have been created by this Constitution. However, the Constitution has certain challenges. As it was seen in the campaigns of the 2010, leading to the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, there were certain groups or stakeholders who had certain misgivings, Madam Speaker. And most of them actually reached a conclusion, and the majority of Kenyans decided that let us have the Constitution as it was then, but in future there will be amendments. There have been attempts, Madam Speaker, that this Constitution be amended severally through the infamous BBI, through a number of citizen initiatives, and even through individual initiatives by members of the public, and even the Punguza Mzigo initiative. What the President has given us in this memoranda, Madam Speaker, is quite insightful, it is quite important, and it is for this House to look into it without having a political bias, noting that the issues that the President has brought forward affects all of us. Let me just go through them in brief, Madam Speaker, and one of it is actually the issue that concerns everyone, the issue of NGCDF. Every member in this House knows that NGCDF is dear to every member of the House and to every citizen and every constituent in this country, because its impact is more felt than even the devolved county government functions. What CDF has done in construction of schools, clinics, or even dispensaries prior to the 2010 Constitution, what it has done in terms of water, what it has done in the building of police stations and security is quite immense. What we need to do as a parliament is to entrench it so that it is not under attack from civil society, busybodies, and those individuals who would want to bring it to an end. CDF, for those members of parliament who served here before CDF was introduced in 2002 by the third government of President Mwai Kibaki, knows the difference which was there before and after. In the 70s and in the 80s, Madam Speaker, this country schools were built through Harambes, where chiefs and assistant chiefs and administrators were getting cows by force from citizens to construct classrooms. But with the advent of CDF, you've seen that we have hundreds of thousands of students who have had scholarships, who have had bursaries, who would have otherwise not gone to school. And I think it is in the wisdom of the President that we entrench this CDF in the Constitution so that it will actually live beyond the life of these members, and it can even take 100 years to come. I want to urge members that we adopt this memoranda on that basis. We also know that, Madam Speaker, that the implementation of the gender rule has been a thorn in the flesh of this House. And I think in the wisdom of our former Chief Justice, Maraga, he asked the former president, the fourth president, to dissolve this House because it was unconstitutional. I think there have been attempts severally by the former leader of majority, Haden Duale, to try to bring in the issue of gender rule. and it has failed. By proposing to this House that this House sits down through its wisdom, through its mechanism, through its institution, to ensure that we entrench the two-third gender rule, doesn't mean that it is only women. This time, it is women who are not able to meet the rule. But noting the development of the girl child in the society, I know very well that in the next 10 or 15 years or 20 years, the gender who will be disadvantaged in this House will be the men. So it is important that we entrench this, knowing very well that it will reach a time when the shoe will be on the other side. And I've seen it in Rwanda, where now the majority of the members of parliament are women. So we really need to pass this memoranda very well, members, noting that the women who come here are our daughters, they are our mothers, they are our sisters, and they are part and parcel of the society. And we don't need to look at it in any other form. We also have the issue of the position of the official, the position of the leader of opposition. I think in the 2010 Constitution, whereas the presidential candidates are not allowed to vie for parliamentary seats, it has come to the realization of all of us that the party leaders lead their members from outside this House. They also lead members from unofficial quarters. It is important that every opposition leader has his office. He is able to rally his troops from an official quarter where everybody knows, both in government and outside in the country, that this is an alternative government, the shadow government in waiting. So we need not to allow them to just be running their offices from the streets, to be preoccupying themselves in areas which could otherwise be done by the Constitution. Two, we all know that every other member who is here, it is possible for any side to be in government in future or be in the opposition. So we are not building, the president is not actually advising for the formation of this particular office, but for posterity, not for individuals, not for a certain group. It is for Kenyans. The government today is possible for them to be the opposition tomorrow. And the vice versa is true. So I want to ask members that as we debate this, let us look at it with sober eyes. Let us look at it with open mind, knowing that we are legislating for the future. We are legislating for Kenyans. We are not legislating for individuals. Finally, we have the parliamentary oversight on the executive. I think one of the members that the role we do, even in our constituencies, I've seen young men critiquing majority of us in the WhatsApp groups. They have been critiquing us, maybe even through the vernacular media stations. Some of the critiques actually build you as a leader. It promotes your ability to work and represent them well. The same thing is for even the executive. The fact that we critique government officers, more so the cabinet secretaries, and even government officers and functionaries, does not mean that we want them to fail. We want them to succeed. We want them to ensure that the policies and the programs that were initiated by the Kenya Kwanza administration for now are able to succeed. If we shall actually go to bed with them and not critique them, that is when the electorate will actually bundle the government out of office. And I want to thank the president for being very wise and knowing that it is very important to have a powerful parliament that is able to critique it and make sure that it performs well. I support, Madam Speaker. Asante.
The Honourable Member for Westlands, Timothy Wanyonyi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for me to speak on this motion. Madam Speaker, it is good that this motion has come back to this House after the attempt by the BBI to do almost the similar amendment that are being proposed here. Madam Speaker, through the BBI initiative, I think the only mistake that BBI did was that there was an exclusive element in that initiative, that some quarters of the population felt excluded from the process. That is why it was opposed, and it was defeated in the Supreme Court, Madam Speaker. And this, I propose, the proposal from the President, Madam Speaker, is good and far-reaching, and we look at how we want to create the position of the leader of opposition. The Kenyans, Madam Speaker, when they elected to give themselves the Constitution of 2010, they wanted to have a presidential system of government. And Madam Speaker, in the presidential setup, we don't have this position of leader of opposition. Therefore, what we are trying to create is a hybrid of trying to marry between the presidential and parliamentary system by bringing in the leader of opposition. And Madam Speaker, that also makes it another angle that that leader of opposition must be a member of parliament, the official leader of opposition, which, Madam Speaker, I believe at the moment, the leaders of opposition are outside of this House. And Madam Speaker, I believe that in the presidential system, once the person who has won and has been confirmed as the president, there's no position for official opposition. The parliament is there. The parliament will provide, Madam Speaker, will provide oversight, and there's some other institution to do that. But Madam Speaker, having looked at this, I think it is good maybe for the Kenyans now to start looking at this issue properly, that the Constitution is ripe for audit, so that we can now look at the areas that are not working, and then we can enrich them by providing amendments. For example, this position of creating the leader of official opposition is a good thing, Madam Speaker, that a leader of official opposition will provide that leadership in the oversight proposal. The other thing, Madam Speaker, proposing to bring the cabinet secretaries to come and answer questions on the floor of the House by amending our standing orders. Madam Speaker, I don't feel comfortable with this proposal because, Madam Speaker, the cabinet secretaries, I think the best way on this, I think, would have been that the proposal to appoint ministers from inside the House, and then we have others from outside, and the others could also be, Madam Speaker, become ex-official members of parliament, that they can come and answer questions. But this initiative, Madam Speaker, I still find it a bit not very comfortable. And I think the cabinet secretaries, the way established today, they should remain where they are. They can answer questions through committees, because committees are set up, Madam Speaker, to provide the oversight over the executive. And Parliament can still do it. We have done it for the past, since 2010, Madam Speaker, the past two parliaments, we have been oversighting government, the executive, and it can still be done with the current establishment. The cabinet secretaries can still come and appear before committees. I believe that is still a very good idea, and we can still entrench on that, Madam Speaker. I believe that the entrenchment of the CDF, the GAV, and the oversight fund for the Senate in the Constitution, Madam Speaker, is a noble idea, so that these funds are also protected from these people who just wake up one day and they just want to go and take it to court, oppose it, and all that. Madam Speaker, what CDF has done for the past, I'm sure, I came into Parliament when CDF was in existence. I'm very sure that members of Parliament who served before the CDF, I think, Madam Speaker, they had a lot of challenges in providing, in serving the people. But through the CDF, Madam Speaker, a lot of burden has been taken away from the parents and the people. That CDF is providing, is building schools. We are paying school fees for children, Madam Speaker, who are not able to raise fees, and many other developments that have been far-reaching in the society. Madam Speaker, it is not if the county government or the devolution, when they want more money, Madam Speaker, Parliament has got the power and authority to provide more allocation for the counties. But it's not right to take away what is already in existence and has had huge impact to the society. Because somebody is arguing that it's breaching the devolution law, Madam Speaker. I believe that CDF and other funds, and we need even to devolve more funds, even to the ward level. From the constituents, we need to have even a fund for the wards, so that at the MCA level, they can also be able to have funds that they can now provide. That money will be reaching to the lowest level of the society. And I believe this is something that we need to support. And Madam Speaker, I think the issues raised in the memorandum by the President, some of them need conversation between the Kenyans and Madam Speaker, so that we can look at it carefully, that these amendments, because we are amending the Constitution, which is the prime law of the land, so that we don't make mistakes. This Constitution is safeguarded because, Madam Speaker, the independent Constitution was abused so much by the people who were in power then. And then, because now when this one was made, they had to make it very difficult for it to be amended. So these initiatives, Madam Speaker, some of them are good, but some of them needs a lot of interaction between the citizens and ourselves, so that we provide the amendments we bring, Madam Speaker, should be good enough and far-reaching to enrich the Constitution the way it is. As I said from the beginning, Madam Speaker, this Constitution, it is just now the time that we need to do thorough audit on the Constitution and see areas that are not working, and we can improve on them. Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me a chance to contribute to this.
The Honorable Richard Yegon, Bomet East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute also in this memoranda from the President. Madam Speaker, on the issue of the cabinet coming to Parliament, this is something which has been long overdue, Madam Speaker. And I would like to say that, according to my own opinion, I was of another different aspect, whereby I was thinking, during the moment, this scenario we are going through, whereby we know that we don't have funds, and the executive has expressed that there is no fund. I was thinking also if we can try to incorporate and say the members of Parliament, the ministers come from the members who are in the House. I think this is going also to help in a way of trying to reduce the wage bill. And again, we know all the members of Parliament are always in the House, and they can be subjected to questions when they are the ministers from this House, Madam Speaker. Again, Madam Speaker, the issue of the NGCDF being incorporated into or entrenched into the Constitution. This is something which is going to help us greatly and avoid all these hula-baloos whereby we are just facing at the moment We are seeing ourselves now, we are getting money in bids, and we are being taken to court. Then trying to entrench into constitution is going to go a long way and make sure that we don't have a lot of problems. Madam Speaker, the last but not least from my side is the issue of creating the official opposition office, whereby all this quagmire which has been going on now, we are facing this quagmire of the government not having funds. It's because at a given time, like the last regime, we had the opposition leader or the alleged opposition members moving and to work with the government of the day, thus endangering the institutions by not being subjected to scrutiny. I would like to say, going to this direction of getting the opposition office or getting the official opposition office is in the right direction, so that we have the government checked by the opposition or the members of the opposing side. This will allow us not to lose revenue and have now having the government which is coming in to say we don't have monies in the government coffers. Mr. Speaker, let me say thank you very much. That is my take on this. I support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Honorable Molo Tende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is an important subject, and I really honestly wish that there were more members here, including on our own side. Now, in the absence of our leader of minority, let me take that role. Mr. Speaker, for starters, I'd like to
be careful about taking people's positions.
You know, this is, as you know, as a lawyer, I'm holding brief. Very briefly, I'm holding brief. Mr. Speaker, let me issue two cautionary statements. First, of the 4 issues that have been raised in the President's memorandum, 3 issues would expressly require referendum. Only one relating to the funds, especially CDF funds and the oversight fund, would not require referendum under Article 255(3). Insofar as the issues on composition of parliament in terms of gender, the issues in introducing CSS to the floor, the issue of introducing a leader of opposition, they are issues that touch on the sovereignty of the people, they touch on the structure of governance and the system of government, they touch on the functions and composition of parliament, and expressly, they would require referendum. So as we discuss this, we need to bear that in mind very clearly. It's not an easy path. And the question I want to issue secondly, Mr. Speaker, is that as members of parliament, it is good to look for the interest of many people. But of paramount importance is the interest of our own citizens, of our own voters. Who are the beneficiaries of these funds? I'd like it to be made clear, and honorable members said that so far the CDF funds are unconstitutional. That is not true. CDF funds are constitutional, and there is no court anywhere so far that has found the 2015 Act unconstitutional. What we are doing is we want to entrench the provision such that we cater for much more. Our sisters who are representing the counties have the NGAF. NGAF has not been properly included. We want to include the NGAF, we want to include the other funds that Senate oversight, so that we call them the oversight funds. That's why we are amending the Constitution. Let it not be supposed that we are amending it because we think that it's unconstitutional. We'll be shooting ourselves in the leg. And for our own purposes, I would really urge members that we need to remove that bit of the memorandum that deals with the CDF funds and the oversight funds, because we were already on it. And let's use it, because as part of the ad hoc committee, we have already designed, we've gone much further than this memorandum. We have already drafted the amendments that are necessary to the Constitution and which do not require referendum. Let us move with speed, run with that, and leave these other issues that might raise partisan politics outside first. Let us take care of our interests before we take care of other interests. And if you don't heed my caution, watch this space. If you maintain this oversight fund together with these other three issues, they will be lost in space, and the consequences will be quite dire because we are racing against time. Specifically, Mr. Speaker, the idea of amending the Constitution is not a bad one. Our Constitution is ripe for amendment. 12 years after any Constitution is enacted, it is good for citizens to sit together and look at what is bad, what is good. But amendment of any Constitution should always be bipartisan. It should always involve the public. In fact, it's not just bipartisan in Parliament, it is beyond Parliament. All previous attempts to amend the Constitution by President Moi then and thereafter by President Kibaki failed because the initiation was not bipartisan. I want to caution that this initiative, insofar as it's not bipartisan, it is the wrong way to look at amendment to the Constitution. We require a bipartisan approach. And I want to tell my brothers and my colleagues in the Justice Committee, right from the word go, this initiative will fail on two accounts. The first is the account on which BBI failed, and it's not saying that I agree with the Supreme Court. I actually don't, but they pronounce themselves, and that is as it is now. Insofar as this initiative is expressly by the President, and this memoranda starts by actually paragraph 1 and 2 restating the date when the President said it, and then attaching a copy of the President memoranda, it will fall afoul the determination of the Supreme Court in terms of initiation. It makes no difference that that was a popular initiative, because even here, the argument will be, but if it is a parliamentary initiative, the President is not a member of Parliament. So how will you say it's a parliamentary initiative and it is initiated by someone outside Parliament? And in both cases, whether it's popular or parliamentary, it passes through Parliament. The second mistake was the President writing to the Speaker. The Speaker is a neutral entity in this House. The person to initiate would be the leader of majority, the leader of minority, or an individual member. But expressly, the leader of majority now introduces the motion, but the motion is reading that it was written to the Speaker. So there are already two technicalities that makes this initiative run afoul of the law. Let me examine two things now. One, the idea of the leader of opposition. Mr. Speaker, this is a bad idea. It is an idea that is not well-founded, either in terms of constitutionalism or in terms of purpose. And it does not take cognizance of Article 108 and Article 130. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. In this House, there is no government, there is no opposition, as per the Constitution. If you look at Article 130, national government comprises the President, the Deputy, and the Cabinet, not the leader of majority, not any of you here in Parliament. And when we come here as minority, we don't come here as opposition, we come as minority. The word opposition does not appear anywhere in the text of the Constitution. So how can you introduce a leader of an non-existent entity? Honorable Anyonyi, I'm telling you now, I'm helping you understand the law, so just listen. That idea is precipitated on a misinformation and misunderstanding that those who are in the majority are here on behalf of the executive, and those in the minority are here on behalf of the opposition. That is not so. In fact, the whole idea of this presidential system is that we, as a parliament, check on the executive as a collectivity. The moment you start trying to bring the leader of opposition, you run into many problems. The first problem is you can actually have a parliament where the majority has not produced the presidency. Can you imagine a situation where if we had maintained what we believe is ours, Azimio is the majority in this House, and Kenya Kwanza is the minority? Can you imagine a situation where then Azimio would have the presidency, then you get another person who is in Azimio to come be the leader of Kenya Kwanza in Parliament? Isn't that ridiculous? It is based on the assumption that whoever produces a majority in Parliament will always be the president. It is not so. Secondly, If you look at 108, there's the leader of majority, there's the leader of minority. So I suppose you then remove the leader of minority and replace it with the leader of opposition. And what do you do with the leader of majority? Do you still call him or her leader of majority? You'll call them leader of government business, and there's no government in parliament. But what if the person who's runner-up is actually an independent? Because the constitution allows. So you run as an independent, and then you get the second highest votes. Then now you come to parliament to head a party which you are not part of. It is ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. Let us rethink this thing seriously. The question of having a leader of opposition because we want accommodation is a question we must examine deeply and not artificially. If we want a parliamentary system, let us be honest and adopt that system. I will tell you that in the Committee of Experts, we had actually adopted a parliamentary system, but it was changed by our colleagues in Parliament then. I'll move very fast, Mr. Speaker, just 2 minutes. The question of cabinet secretaries in Parliament, they will be strangers. The President is not a stranger because he's allowed. The head of Treasury comes here as of necessity because we are the budget making. But the cabinet secretary does not come to the floor of this House. The cabinet secretary stays at the bar. So if you want cabinet secretaries on the floor of this House, then you must admit them as members of Parliament. That changes the numbers, that changes the functions. And is it a good thing? No. First, because you will definitely weaken the committee system. Our constitution gives committees so many powers, the powers of the High Court, which have never been used. Why haven't we used them? If we can't use them as 15 or 20 people sitting and we have the power, what is the assurance that as over 349 we will use them? And Mr. Speaker, if you allow me. Mark you that when you do that, something else comes into play. There's a reason why there's a prescription in composition of committees. Those of the majority always have a majority of 1. But in the oversight committees, those in the minority have a majority of 1. So that in the oversight committees, we can better check the national executive. If we come here with the numbers the way now playing, there will be no oversight. The oversight committees will be dead. Parliament as a plenary will be doing put the question. And the question will be put and the CSS will go. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, lastly, that we might think we are strengthening parliamentary democracy, but we are weakening it. And we must be very careful, including on the question of numbers. You must know that the question of numbers in terms of gender representation goes against the contrary question of the cost. Are Kenyans prepared to pay 100 more members of parliament or not? I think the fundamental question we must ask ourselves, do we still need 2 houses of parliament today? If you ask me that, I would say no. Thank you so much, because we have entrenched devolution sufficiently. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you so much, well said. I hope you get a chance to pursue those arguments at the right time. The Honorable Timothy Rotich of Market West.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this heavy subject matter. Mr. Speaker, I know it's not very easy to speak after listening to wisdom from Senior Counsel Otiende Omolo, but Mr. Speaker, I can only say this, that looking at the intention of the President, it only takes a President who believes in constitutionalism and the rule of law to be able to propose such raft of constitutional amendments. Mr. Speaker, if you have a President who still believes that we still need a strong opposition in this country, then as a country, we must be proud of that President. Because if it was any other President, it would be, his intention would be to suppress the opposition. So, Mr. Speaker, looking at this document that we have today, Otiende Omolo has talked about that the President has initiated a constitutional amendment. In my opinion, this is a memorandum. This cannot qualify as an initiation of a constitutional amendment. This is a memorandum requesting Parliament to institute a constitutional amendment and cannot therefore be interpreted to mean the President has initiated a constitutional amendment. Mr. Speaker, I have looked at the issues in a broader perspective. On the issue of gender inclusion and affirmative action, Mr. Speaker, it must be alive to this assembly that already as we speak, the court has made a finding to the effect that this house is not properly constituted and is not in conformity with the law. So it is a matter that we must take up seriously. Mr. Speaker, I have looked at the proposal by the President, and I associate myself fully with that proposal. The President has argued that currently this House has 290 members of Parliament. So a third of it, we shall have 97 members of Parliament who are women, in terms of gender, as currently constituted. So, Mr. Speaker, the proposal by the President is a sound proposal that, if adopted, will be able to make the equation easier in terms of amending the Constitution to input the gender principle. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the issue, on the same issue, the proposal by the President, which, if adopted by this House, will be progressive, is he has provided that the law be amended to establish a women's inclusion and political participation fund. Mr. Speaker, gender inclusion should be progressive and realized at a certain end. The issue of including women in the Constitution shall not be there forever. That is why he has proposed, and I associate myself, that there be a sunset clause to retire it upon attainment of the constitutional requirement. So as we retire to amend this Constitution, we should remember that we should have a sunset clause, because there shall come a time that we shall have equality in this country, so that we avoid this gender of trying to assist the other gender. The issue of CDF and the Senate oversight and the NGAF, Mr. Speaker, I fully support it, that we entrench it in the Constitution. And the reason for that is that in the event that the matter is taken to court, then to amend a legislation or a statute is easier than to amend the Constitution. So that if a question comes as to the constitutionality of CDF or NGAF or the Senate Oversight Fund, then it may require a referendum in future in order to amend it. That is why I fully support the same. And Mr. Speaker, in terms, I also support the Senate Oversight, the Senate Oversight Fund, so that currently, as we speak, there is a lot of wastage in the government, in the counties, so that Senate can be properly empowered to be able to check the excesses of the county governments. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the official leader of opposition, Mr. Speaker, Montesquieu talked of separation of powers. He's the father of separation of powers. Mr. Speaker, for a country to function properly, right now as we speak, we have a serious minority in the opposition. For a country to function properly, we must have an office of the leader of opposition. And the reason for that is that that office will be able to check the excesses of the government. Mr. Speaker, it is very dangerous to have a government that is not properly checked. So, Mr. Speaker, instead of the leader of opposition going to the streets, let him come to this House and advance the interests of the minorities at the floor of this House. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the proposals in totality. The time shall come. My senior, Mr. Onyamora, has talked about that it requires a referendum. Any proposal, whether be it parliamentary or is it or one initiated by through public initiative, if it is initiated by this House and it is accepted by this House, and it comes to the determination whether we require a referendum, then that matter shall be taken to a referendum, irrespective of where it originates. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I support this memorandum.
Honorable Malim Farah.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, we are going to be making very fundamental changes into our system of government that will impact on generations to come. It is only fair that we give it the utmost thought and not think about the political expediency of the day, but think about, for posterity, how this country is going to be. Mr. Speaker, I have said this somewhere else. I was in this house myself, in the 7th Parliament, pushing for a constitutional agenda, rewriting the constitution, a new constitution, and saying that it must come from Wanjiku. It must come from the ordinary people out there. At that time, our head of state, the late Moi, I was in the opposition, was wondering why 222 educated, elected leaders of this country would want to surrender the role of thinking for the future of this country to somebody who's out there in the streets, who's either roasting maize or who's either doing a small thing there. I had a problem with that, but now I never thought that was going to bite me again and come back to us. I am convinced that we made a mistake and we should have listened in part, not in totality, to that late sage and listened to his ideas. None of the American 37 constitutional amendments that were done in the US did require a referendum. Personally, I am convinced, by and large, except in matters that touch on very pertinent issues in 255 of the, I think 255 of the Constitution, this House has the capacity and the powers to amend any Constitution and do a lot of work on the Constitution. When we were trying to put this Constitution together, rewrite it, this Constitution we have today, in terms of the governance, whether it's going to be a presidential system or it's going to be a parliamentary system, became a victim to the political intrigues of that day. There was a split within my party, which was called ODM that time, and then there was this other group which had advocated for a devolution that was going to be 13 or 14 different regions in the country, based pretty much on the way the provinces were then, plus a few provinces that were super big and that were going to be split into 3 or 2. And then there were those people who were opposed to devolution completely. Then there was the issue of parliamentary and presidential system. Both of them became victims to the political intrigues of that time, where there was a lot of political infighting, both within ODM and also other centers. Mr. Speaker, we had a system that was a hybrid of a presidential system and a parliamentary system. We had a president who had a constituency, and people went and voted for their president of choice. But that president came in here to be sworn in as the MP for Odaya, as the MP for Baringo Central, as the MP for wherever he wanted. And if he failed to secure the presidential votes, he will still come to the parliament as a member of parliament for that constituency and lead the opposition from here. Lead the opposition from here. We had a system in which the ministers were from parliament. And because they were from parliament, we could censure them. I remember one day sitting on that chair, Mr. Speaker, and I sent 8 ministers out of the House because they did not come up with satisfactory answers that is, in the opinion of the House, and in my opinion also, satisfactory and befitting their status in the country and the manner in which they should represent, how Kenyans should be governed. And I told them, we are not going to transact any more business until you come up with answers that are going to satisfy this House. And the president told them Do you know what you have done, you people? When this kind of thing happens, that government resigns. That is a censure motion on the government because you did not do your job right. And Kibaki warned his own ministers and told them, you go to Parliament, Parliament is supreme, Parliament has got that, you must attend to the issues on Parliament and act accordingly and fast enough on issues that are raised by members of Parliament. Today, you have ministers who we don't even know their names. I don't know most of them their names now. And during our time when we were growing up, people like the MP for Kwanza, who is an old guy like me, although he pretends to be young and dyes his hair. You remember we used to have all the ministers, cabinet ministers in primary school on our own walls there. And we knew all the names of all the ministers in the country. And you knew the ordinary person out there in the village knew if they had issues with education, that minister must do something better than he's doing now. And when the delegations come to Gatundu, the ordinary people used to come and complain about such and such minister is sleeping on his job. We have a problem in education. We have a problem in roads and infrastructure. We have a problem in public works. We have a problem in local government. And that is why the late Mudavadi was such a famous guy. He was bigger than life because local government is the area where all the country was represented. Municipalities, county councils, town councils, urban councils. My position is we cannot bring in 20 strangers into the house and call them ministers that you have no powers to censure them. You can't tell them get out of the house and don't come back to this house until you're able to do your job right. How are you going to censor a minister who does not come with a satisfactory answer here? A minister who's sleeping on the job. Based on the proceedings of the house at that time, I think what we need to do is that we have to admit that we made certain mistakes. We borrowed from the German lander. We borrowed from the Americans something. We borrowed something from the British. And then we tried to put together that thing for it to work. We are always people who want to borrow. I mean, we Africans must come up with our own narrative. It's like saying you have a car with an engine of Audi, with a chassis of Mercedes, and with a body of, and what do you call an electrical system of Toyota. How far would that car take you? It can't take you. This constitution is similar to that. We need to revisit that. As far as the issue of the national government affirmative action fund is concerned, I had been advocating for something similar to that from the beginning. I said instead of setting